All right. Peace and blessings, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the STEM Files, the voice of STEM talent in Black culture. On tonight's episode, we chat with the also talented, multi-talented Neil Thompson on patenting your ideas as well as so much more. Tune in for more of this great dynamic session after this. All right. Again, welcome back, family, to this New Year's Eve edition, if you will, of the STEM Files, where we highlight the best and brightest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I am, again, your co-host, your brilliant engineer, typically joined by Tariq Cardiac. This is the Voice of STEM Talent in Black Culture, every Thursday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the STEM Files, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel at the STEM Files as well. Again, this is Jabril Muhammad. I am a civilian mechanical engineer focusing on naval ship fluid systems with a background in material science and engineering. Also, always joined by my co-host Tariq Cardiac, the biomedical research scientist with a background in cardiovascular pathobiology, which is the study of how diseases form in the heart and other tissues. But family, as always, this is not what we brought you here for. We bring you here to make sure that we showcase, like we said, the best and brightest. So it's always about who we bring on as the guest in order to learn more about them, their journey, and how they're being impactful in STEM. So without further ado, I want to introduce to some, but present to all, again, the multi-talented Neil Thompson. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing well, Jabril. Thanks for having me, and thanks for noting me as among the best and brightest. I'll take all compliments.
Yeah, listen, man, you being modest. I remember that conversation we had, the meet and greet and everything, and just things I know about you. You're definitely representing, and obviously for our people. So, as we get started, what I'm saying, we always like to make sure that everyone knows a little bit about who we're bringing on. So, why don't you just give us a brief intro, and then we'll get right into the nitty gritty.
You got it. Well, everybody, I'm a bunch of things, I guess. I have a bunch of interests, and I follow them to see where they lead me. So for a number of years, I worked in the medical device industry as a product development engineer. And it was actually from that I had to give presentations at one of the companies I worked at on a monthly basis in front of senior management. And those first few presentations were absolutely horrendous. I didn't know it was possible to sweat as profusely as I used to during those presentations. It was like right. I just came out the shower with all my clothes on. It was gross. But I got a lot better at it over time because I didn't want to look like a fool every time I had to give these presentations. And I took everything that I learned in becoming more effective at presenting, and I turned it into an online course called Teach the Geek to Speak. So the course is geared towards engineers and scientists like myself that have to give presentations in front of people, typically decision makers and those that are outside our field of expertise. And the Teach the Geek course is housed within the Teach the Geek platform. Right now, it's the first course, but I plan on developing other courses that would be of interest to engineers and scientists. So that's one of the things I do. And you also mentioned patents, so I'm a patent agent. I became one 8 years ago. I was working at a startup company. The boss of the company wanted all the engineers to become patent agents, so he wouldn't have to outsource patent drafting to outside counsel. And so I became one because I thought it was required. Turns out it wasn't so much because none of the other engineers did it. I'm the only one that ended up doing it. And would you know, right. he still outsourced all the patent drafting to outside counsel. So, so I didn't even get to really do anything patent related at that company. It was when I left and was doing it freelance for a while, but then eventually hooked up with a firm here in the San Diego area where I live. So that's another thing that I do. A couple of former coworkers and I do packaging consulting with typically smaller medical device companies because they focus heavily on the product that they're developing and kind of give the packaging short shrift. So that's another thing. And then I guess the last thing that I do is my children's book, and it's called Ask Uncle Neil, Why is My Hair Curly? It's about my nephew asking me why his hair is the way it is, and I use science to answer the question. The motivation for that book is to promote STEM education to Black children We're highly underrepresented in the STEM fields, and I don't think it has to be that way. The book is geared towards kids fairly young, I'd say 6 to 8, because I want to give them the
Mm,
confidence to know that there are no careers that are off limits to them. I get the sense that a lot of people in our community, the Black community, think that engineering and science is for other people, but it doesn't have to be. It can be for us as well. It's for anybody who shows that
right.
interest and is willing to do the work. So those are the 4 things that I mainly work on these days.
Man, listen, family, I hope y'all are listening because, like I said, bro, systematically, just like engineer, just laid out point after point, all the things he's doing. So I heard entrepreneurship, I heard being in the industry, I heard presentation skills. We're talking about author, consultant, patent agent, engineer. We want to take a step back because so one of the things I was so excited about, and I hope you can kind of talk through this with us. So I always talk about and open up how I have a background in material science and engineering. And it's a pleasure to have someone who also has that background on. So, for our listeners, can you break down succinctly, concisely, what is material science and engineering at its core, and how does it apply to medical devices as you used it in the past?
Yeah, well, yeah. So I my undergraduate degree is in, as you mentioned, material science and engineering, and I also got graduate degrees, master's degrees in biomedical engineering too, which is pretty helpful working in the medical devices industry. But essentially, if I had to be succinct, material science and engineering is the study of materials and their use in objects and in products and I guess in matter in general. I mean, there's different types. You know, there's metals, polymers, ceramics. You know, a mix of both composites. So all the
Mm-hmm.
above. And so
Right,
it's a funny story how I even ended up in materials science and engineering. I ended up in
right,
engineering because my father said I should study engineering, and for the longest
right,
while, I used to lie about the reason I ended up in engineering because I didn't think it was a very interesting story. Because whenever
right,
you ask other people that question, they usually have something to say like in high school they were part of a robotics club, or when they were
right,
children they played with Legos. But I never played with Legos. I wasn't part of any robotics club. I had no clue what I was going to do after high school. And when it comes to science and math, I was never the best in the class. I mean, I was never the worst, but somewhere in the middle. But my father thought
right.
that engineering was a stable career, I suppose, and that's why he said study it. And since I had no other ideas of what I was going to do, I said, all right, engineering it is. And then the reason I even did material science and engineering is the school that I wanted to go to, I was actually waitlisted. So I didn't get in right
Mm,
away. So I even got to the point where I accepted an offer at another school that was out of town, but I didn't want to go out of town. I want to stay in town in the big city.
right.
And so, so my father and I actually went down to the school to essentially ask them to admit me, and they did. But the only programs that were available were geotechnical and material science and engineering. And
Wow.
I picked material science and engineering because when I think of geotechnical, I think of mining, and mining doesn't happen unless it's up north somewhere. I didn't want to move up north because it's cold as hell.
Hey,
so,
very practical thought process.
so
Absolutely.
material science and
Yes, sir.
engineering it was, and that's how I started engineering.
Wow. It's so funny because, someone listening can be like, "What?" I mean, I feel like that's a kind of uneventful story, but when you think about it, man, some of the most impactful things happen by the simplest of whether you call it a mistake or processes. And then I think, your ability to take something that kind of happened and say your father wanted to get into and now kind of build off of that from the mentality in terms of critical thinking and problem solving, not only making something of yourself but extending beyond yourself to people via consulting, right, via your book and everything. It kind of speaks volumes. So if anyone ever thinks, when I always talk about what I do, my background in material science, that's the type of stuff I'm talking about when you talk about your different material classes and really having a material understanding, right? And then interfacing with other engineers, you understand that you always can give value. Why? Because everything that everyone works on, whether it's electronics, whether it's chassis or things for cars, whether it's the material for bridges, everything's made out of something. So you live in a very versatile realm where you can add value and you shouldn't use that because it's very brittle, so it won't last in terms of ductility and tensile strength. Or you shouldn't use that because as the temperature changes, the material properties change and then thereby it degrades. Things like that. So you're able to add value in that way. I want to move forward, and we really want to get into this patenting. So we think of patents, and we think about intellectual property. So what is a patent, and what is it not? Particularly when you talk about trademarks and copyrights and things of that nature.
Well, I think a misconception about patents is that they give you the right to make, or use, or sell your invention, but it's actually the opposite. It gives you the right to keep others from making, using, or selling your invention. And the main difference is it's possible to get a patent, but still infringe on someone else's patent. It happens all the time. People get, or companies
Mm,
get sued for patent infringement every day, and they settle oftentimes, or it goes to trial, and millions of dollars, sometimes billions of dollars are at stake, all based on a piece of paper with claims on it. But so
right.
essentially, I work as a patent agent as opposed to a patent attorney. The difference is law school. Attorneys went to law school and patent agents didn't. But they both have the ability to draft patents and prosecute them in the US Patent and Trademark Office. So essentially, I help inventors draft their applications. We file them with the patent office, and typically they get rejected. Most applications actually get rejected. It's not a
Mm,
simple task of just filing an application and waiting a while and it gets approved. Often it gets rejected, but that's okay because you have the opportunity to essentially have a dialogue with the patent office and to try to convince them to allow the patent to issue. And that's
mm,
essentially what patent agents and patent attorneys get paid for. It's the back and forth with the patent office to allow the invention to be issued as a patent. And you mentioned trademarks and copyrights. I don't work with either of those. I work solely with patents. But
right.
essentially, you get patents for inventions, typically tangible. I mean, for the longest while, they were tangible things you could actually see and hold. But you know, with time, as you know, technology is all the rage, and we have software and artificial intelligence, machine learning, all these different industries are popping up, and these industries are looking for patents for their inventions as well. So it's possible to get patents in things perhaps that you can't see as well now. Trademarks and copyrights are a bit different. Copyrights typically written works, and
Hmm.
trademarks are
Right.
typically brands. So
Right.
trademark and so typically IP attorneys, intellectual property attorneys, they may do all three, but patent attorneys certainly do patents, and patent agents just do patents.
Thank you so much. I think that was so. I love how you broke that down. It's so important because whether you have a brand, you talk about like your Nike, or you have a musical work, right? Something written down, or something that you compose, or you have an invention. It's so key to understand. Okay, what type of intellectual property am I dealing with, and what is the appropriate route to go to make sure this is protected properly. And I love how you mentioned that. Yes, not only is the patent process a long process, but it's not necessarily that just because you go through the process, it's going to be patented. And that brings me to my next question. You talked about patents being for inventions. What also makes an invention, or uh, what in the nature of an invention makes something patentable? Like
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
right? So that was my question. Go ahead.
yeah. So they're actually it can get complicated actually because as I mentioned, there's software, AI, machine learning, which is all the rage these days. And when these patent laws were developed, all the hundreds or so years ago, obviously those things didn't exist. So anything that was patentable tended to be a machine, a process, perhaps some type of manufacture. You know, something in things that you could actually see and hold and behold. But with time, because of the advancement of industries in general, it's become a lot more murky as to what is
Mm,
patentable. So a few years ago, there was actually a case that came up. It's the Alice case, which essentially made software very difficult to patent in the U.S. It has to be, I mean, to be able to get a software patent in the U.S., you essentially have to combine it with something that's tangible to be able to even get it through the patent
mm,
office. So, so
mm,
software combined with some kind of hardware, essentially, and that applies
mm,
to AI and machine learning as well. And as I mentioned, I worked in medical devices. Getting patents for diagnostic machines is essentially impossible now due to another case of the Prometheus case here in the U.S. To get patents for medical device diagnostic machines. because the patent or the case law has deemed them uh, natural, or it's something that occurs in nature. Essentially, getting the result of what the diagnostic machine says is not considered patentable. So even
Right.
in it's been a lot more difficult. Another thing I would want to mention about patents is that they're only good in the country in which you request the patent or you file in. So there's no such thing as
Mm,
an international patent. You can so if you
that's a
file in
great
the U.S.,
point.
it's only good in the U.S. So if you file in Europe, it's only good there. Australia only good there. And these costs can really add up if you're looking for patent protection in various countries, because you're looking at not only the filing fees in these various countries, you also have to use counsel in those countries to file the patents. So being a patent agent here in the U.S., I cannot file a patent in Australia. I would have to engage a patent attorney in Australia to file the patent in Australia. And not only
Mm,
that, there's translation fees. So depending on the countries that you file in, if English isn't the first language, you have to have the patent translated into those languages, and that can
right.
cost tens of thousands of dollars to patent or in these various countries. So the cost really adds up over time. I oftentimes I remember one time I had a call with somebody, and we were talking about his patent. And then when I mentioned the cost, he's like, "Oh crap! I thought it was only cost me a couple $100." I was like, "A couple $100 is only for it's only for the prior art search. We're not even talking about the cost of actually filing the patent, the cost of the patent agent or patent attorney actually drafting it, and then any costs with the correspondence with the patent office. I mean, you're looking. It's easy to spend about $10,000 on a patent application."
Hmm. So I want to take a quick moment. So for those some of the people in the audience, we have a question. We have a couple funny comments. So my boy Orlando said, "LOL, did you just call my man's life story uneventful?" I did not say it was uneventful. It was the way I said, so one thing, knowing Neil for a couple of times, Neil has a way of presenting things like it's no big deal. So the way he presented it, that's all I meant. But I wasn't trying to call his actual life story uneventful. But thank you for that, and I will definitely catch myself going forward. He definitely does know his stuff as well, Keenan. Zatima Brown, she asked, could you discuss food patents? Do you have any experience with food patents, and where there may be a gray area with those type of patents as opposed to other ones?
Well, I mean, technically, it is possible to get a patent on some sort of recipe if you wanted to. I mean,
Okay.
as far as I know, there isn't anything barring that. I don't think of any. Can't really recall any case law that barred food patents. But the patents I work on mostly, I work here in the San Diego area, which is a big biotech and pharma and medical device area, life sciences. So most of the patents I work on are medical devices, biotech, and sometimes pharma. But a lot of times also, I mentioned AI. A lot of these inventions now have an AI aspect to them. And my background is in medical devices that didn't really require all that much AI. So it's been really interesting learning more about it and drafting patents for it.
That's a good question. We also got another question from high school alumni and classmate of mine. Said, would you not trademark a recipe as opposed to patenting a recipe?
Maybe you copyright it, not necessarily
Copyright it.
trademark. Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
And that very well might be a better route, because as I mentioned, patents are rather expensive. Copyrights not nearly as much.
Got you. Thank you so much for that. So, you know, one thing I was thinking about in our first conversation we had, and kind of thinking about all of the inventions that we as a people have made while in this country, slavery times up till now. In your humble opinion, if you think about the things that we've been responsible for, do you see us in a different position now if proper credit was attributed to the things we've invented
Oh,
since being in this country?
no question. I mean, I said in my intro that I wrote a children's book, and
Right.
the motivation for it was to give Black children the confidence to know that there are no careers that are off limits to them. If we've known for generations now how many inventions were invented by Black people, my book wouldn't have been necessary. We would have already
Mm,
known that there are things that we could do. I mean, we would already know that there are no limits to what we can do based on what we've
right.
already done. I mean, If
Right.
you think of the Super Soaker gun, that was only invented in the 90s, and that was invented
Right.
by a black man. I mean, who's still alive. He's
Right.
still walking the earth. But I guess we're not taught these things, unfortunately. And luckily for me, I grew up in. It's funny because I didn't recognize it at the time, but my parents were very intentional, I guess, on having my siblings, and I have two sisters. So the three of us learn about our history. So Black
Right.
History wasn't just a month in February; it was something that we learned about all the time. So I grew
Right.
up knowing about Lonnie Johnson, from the '90s. I grew up knowing about Granville T. Woods and Elijah McCoy and Garrett
Right.
A. Morgan. All black people that have invented things that actually were patented. So it's
Right.
not. So we have a history in the world in inventing things, whether accredited or not. And I get the sense that if more of us understood that and really internalized that, books like mine wouldn't even be necessary.
Absolutely, man. And like you said, you know, it brings me to my next point and what I really want to dig into because to have such a rich history, right, and to be exemplifying genius in a subservient state, to now kind of know and be able to reach back, using that Sankofa term to reach back and understand, okay, this is where we were, this is who I am, and now move forward with a new and renewed identity is so important when it comes to STEM. You mentioned in our other conversation how you want us to be able to move past the idea of we have to see ourselves in the picture to know that we can be great at something. Can you take your time and unpack that? Because I feel like that's so important of a concept and a conversation for right now.
Whenever I hear the term "you have to see it to believe it," I take it to mean that for myself, if I don't see another black person doing something that I want to do, that means that I don't believe that I can do it. And I just find that to be such a dangerous and harmful mentality or attitude to have for myself or any black person. It keeps us in this box of not potentially moving forward in things that we want to do. If there are people in this world, whether they are black or not, that are doing things that we want to do, then we inherently should know that we can do it because there is no one that is higher or lower than us. We are equal to everybody else. And I feel that so sincerely. I only learned maybe later in life that I have an uncle who was an engineer. I didn't become an engineer. I mentioned I became an engineer because my father said I should. I never questioned whether I could because I was black. And when I was in school, it was myself and another black woman who were in all of my classes. So it was just the two of us for basically the from sophomore to senior year. It was just the two of us. But I never looked around and saw the fact that I was the only black person and thought I wasn't supposed to be there. I saw other people there. So there's other human beings there. I'm a human being too. I could be there too. I so I'm really it's something that I feel very strongly about. Maybe a year or so ago, I was at a networking event and an acquaintance, a black woman, maybe a couple of years older than me, she had said that whenever she goes to these networking events, especially here in the San Diego area, where the black population is fairly low, certainly lower than the national average in the U.S. Whenever
Right.
she goes to these events, she looks around and sees there's now a whole lot of black people there, and then she gets uncomfortable and then wants to
Right.
leave. But I remember
Right.
thinking,
Right.
I didn't say this to her in the time, but I remember thinking to myself, if you're uncomfortable every time you go to one of these events and you don't see black people, you're uncomfortable at a lot of events and you want to leave a lot of
Right.
events.
Right.
What? How is that helpful to you? I mean, when I go to these events, I also know there's not a whole lot of black people there, but it's not of no concern to me thinking that because of that I'm not supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be wherever
Right.
I'm at. So
Right.
I go. So
Right.
even if there are people there that don't think that I'm supposed to be there, I don't really care. I don't really think, I mean, not only that, but I don't really think that the majority of people are even thinking that much about my presence at their event anyway. They're probably more thinking
Right.
about their own presence at the event and networking and getting what they want to get out of the event, which is why I'm there.
Right.
So I'm a big believer in wherever us black people are, we're supposed to be there.
Right. And this goes back. I think talked to you about this too. How I do my best not to use the term minority particularly as it comes to you and I. You know, self, I, proper self concept and identity and advocacy is so key. I am, to my knowledge, the only engineer in my family, right? My parents aren't engineers. My younger brother's in engineering school right now, and I had I didn't have a whole lot of direct mentors growing up that were engineers. But I knew that in order to build a nation and to have tangible output, it is the STEM fields that represent some of the greatest of those types of fields or things that can render that output. And then compounded with my interest in critical thinking, problem solving, I played a lot with connects and things growing up. I was like, I had a mind and a propensity toward that type of career. So I was like, let me delve into this. And it was me doing research and bringing things to my parents, like, this is what I want to do. And I'm gonna do my best to do it well, put a smile on my face, and be a certain standard. We talked about, I think, people would tell me you don't look like an engineer. You don't really remind me. I said, how many engineers do you know? I said, because I'm not socially awkward, I can speak well, and I was homeschooled. I'm not. So what is your thought process of an engineer? An engineer is simply one who takes these scientific mathematical principles to try to bring into existence that which never was. That's lit to me, and why not want to be a part of that? So that's so key. I'm so glad that you mentioned that in terms of not having to see yourself in a picture, but we have to also understand that things take time, and seeing yourself in a picture is key going forward. Ergo, your book. Continuing on, can you talk to us a bit more about what you do as a consultant? And why you chose packaging? And that's so crazy because people don't consider the packages that items are in and how they can help or hinder the process of delivery as well as other avenues. So can you speak to that a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, that actually stemmed also from my days working in medical devices at a larger company. So we had to take on that responsibility of developing the packaging and the product. And at least kudos to the companies I worked at, but packaging was actually implemented into the entire design process. So it wasn't something that we were thinking about near the end when the product was ready and like, oh crap, now we got to get the packaging together. It was something that was kind of streamlined together. And I guess especially with smaller companies which don't protect, which potentially don't have as many engineers on staff, and perhaps they're not as likely to have the packaging and the product being developed, together. And that's where we come in. We help these companies, these smaller companies, with their packaging products. And packaging is, at least in medical devices, is regulated as well. It's not just the product. So it's really important that these companies take the packaging into account, because you don't want your product to be recalled because of a packaging issue. That's just be the worst outcome ever. So that's typically the companies we will work with. Perhaps they don't have packaging engineers on staff. Their expertise is more with developing the actual product, and we come in and we help them with developing the packaging so they can actually sell the product.
Absolutely. So what are some considerations? And again, not getting too into details, but when you talk about packaging for different items, right? What are some of the considerations? Like when we think about material selection, right? What are my constraints? What am I able to, increase and decrease to get the to move forward in the best way in terms of selecting my material? So what are some of those constraints that are mulled around or thrown around when it comes to package selection and choosing the best package for your product?
Yeah, so with the products that we typically work in with medical devices, either they're packaged in pouches or packaged in trays. What's really important is the strength of the lid strength if you're dealing with a tray, or the burst strength, the seal strength of if you're dealing with a pouch. So you have to do testing to see that the pouch isn't going to just open up if when it's on the shelf or in transit. So there's actual simulations that other companies, vendors that we use, do on the packaging that a company wants to use for their product, and it has to meet a certain standard for it to be allowed. And as I mentioned, all of these packages are it's FDA regulated, just like the products are. In terms of the actual materials that these products are made out of, they have to be fairly inert in the sense that they can't react with
Right.
with the actual product that's in them. I mean, a lot of times, especially in medical device, also these devices have to be sterilized, so they can't have any kind of adverse effect to the sterilization. And then I mentioned there's the burst strength and the seal strength of the actual seals of the trays and the pouches. So all of these things need to be taken into account when it comes to developing packaging for a medical device.
Family, listen, y'all. I hope y'all are having a good time. I'm having a great time. We already halfway through the show. Now, I told you the hour goes by so fast. Look, 30 minutes in already, bro. I'm having a great time. I hope you guys are understanding. And one of the reasons why I asked you to take us through that is so we can understand more of that engineering process and how this doesn't occur in a vacuum. You're talking to fellow engineers, your team. What do you think about this? Well, I think the packaging could be this, or do you have these dimensions? But you know what? It was leaking. Why is it leaking? And then, well, what's the regulation? And then you're doing research and bringing together all this information to then give a proper consultation. Because when you sign off on things, say, hey, this is good, and we've helped to consult, if it ends up being less than ideal, that comes back to you. So the engineer is one who has to really take his or her time to make sure that they are doing proper research and using the proper processes and thought processes in order to bring together a solution. So I love that you highlighted that, and I appreciate that you're working in that arena. I'm definitely looking forward to working more with you and talking more about that, how we can kind of work together. So like we said, we reached the halfway point of the show, and I would love to highlight the parent company again of the STEM Files, which is Original Man Scientific. Original Man Scientific is his brother Tariq's brainchild, and we are both co-owners. He serves as the founder as well as the chief operating officer, and I am the director of engineering. Original Man Scientific is our research and development company, which is geared towards delivering the advantages of R&D to your community. We understand that we as a people, particularly other marginalized groups as well, have a number of ideas, and there's nothing more frustrating than being creative in your mind but cannot take that creative mind and make it a reality. So we move and we're growing to be able to be a physical presence in many different communities where you see our people and have them walk down the street like, oh my God, I've been having this idea for so long. Now I can go in here and get matched up and have access to equipment, mentorship and personnel, internships, apprenticeships, intellectual property protection to take what's in my mind, put it down on a piece of paper, have it drawn out, and through the process to bring it to fruition and hopefully the market. And also, we're not interested in taking a bulk of the profits and ownership of what it is that you've created. This is for you and for your legacy. So that's Original Man Scientific, and we're doing our best to grow more and more every single day. Neil, in light of, it's a bit early, I'm talking about this, but we'll continue moving forward. You asked me a question, and we talked about, it being New Year's Eve, and we're about to get into everybody trying to start their workout regimens again and focus on their finances and where they want their family to be, the personal. You asked me what my goals are going to this next 365. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mirror it, I'm gonna flip it back to you, and we can maybe both answer that question to kind of engage a little bit different. So looking forward to this next year and maybe even next 5 years. Where do you see yourself? Where do you see Teach the Geek? Where do you see your packaging consultancy and anything else you are currently working on?
So when it comes to the children's book first, I plan on making it a series. So as I mentioned, the first one was about my nephew asking me why his hair is the way it is. Essentially, any subsequent book is going to be my nephew asking me another question, and I use science to answer it. So hopefully in the next 365, I could come up with another idea for a book and put that out. In terms of Teach the Geek, it's coming up with other courses that would be of interest to scientists and engineers, perhaps courses on networking, interviewing, other soft skill type of courses that perhaps we lack. And, communication was the first one that I thought of just based on my own struggles as I mentioned before, having to give those presentations in front of management and noticing that a lot of the other engineers had those same struggles. They weren't much better at presenting than I was. So that's another one coming up with other
I bear
courses.
witness.
Yeah, I wasn't the only one wetting the bed up there, that's for sure. And then there's also with Steriliant, just continuing to build that out, getting more, I guess, sustaining business from the companies that we work with instead of a whole lot of one-off type of projects. Getting the sustaining business, so we keep a relationship with the companies that we have, because it's always easier to do more work for one company than to go find another company to do work for.
Right.
So there's that. Right. And then when it comes to the patents, it's just really continuing on with what I've been doing. It's perhaps expanding out to more of the biotech type of patent applications, since currently I work mostly on medical devices. So, just trying to expand, I guess, my skill set in terms of drafting applications. So those are the 4 things, I guess, I really look forward to building on.
Absolutely. And then I guess I'll answer this question too. I promise you I would. And we're going to actually segue back after that to Keenan's question. He wants to learn more and hear more about public speaking. So for myself, obviously, I have a lot of personal and familial goals, but keeping it in the STEM realm, like I just got finished talking about Original Man Scientific, me and Tariq's goals really reside in becoming that household name. So really increasing that internal revenue in terms of the external services, whether it's mobile app development, shipping container solutions, product development, manufacturing, prototyping, etc., to be able to start to really generate, and also from the STEM files, growing our platform as well, to be able to generate constant revenue, so that now we can look at things like real estate. You really become able to deliver R&D to a community when they can walk down. If you're in Philly, walk down in Nicetown, walk down Boardner, you look to your left, look to your right. Oh, snap. What's that? You see Original Man Scientific, you walk in, see people who look like you and I working in those fields. So to be able to go from the digital space and doing things distance-wise, to be able to crush it and integrate ourselves into the physical space, to be a bastion there, and then also grow toward being able to secure contracts to employ at least a few people, and get a couple bills taken care of on their end. So definitely increasing that's one of our goals going forward. And obviously the ultimate goal, we look 5+ years down the line, is to be able to be a chief operating officer in DOE full time, right? I think I articulated this to you, but anybody who knows me knows that a job was never my ultimate goal. That's not how I was raised. That's not my thought process. So any type of position I've ever had, I've always thought about as a stepping stone. Not that I can't work for somebody else, but I realize that we're in an era where more of us need to be able to provide an area for others who desire to work for people that have their best interest at art and look like them. So to be an owner and to be able to move in that way. So hope that was helpful. Hope that was inspirational, not just from me, but from Neil, for people who want to do that. So Neil, we talk about this public speaking thing, bro. And the stereotype for us engineers that we don't know how to talk, we're real smart, we do our things in the corner, but when we get in front of people, we can't make that connection and speak to the layman. So give us a little sneak peek. We know you got a course, just a little sneak peek of some of the skill sets and the thought processes that you attack when it comes to public speaking.
When you said before, just to go back to something you said, when you said people that look like us, you're referring to Black people, right?
Black people, yes, sir.
Okay. just making sure, man. Just making sure, because sometimes when people say that,
you got me on about that. You know me. I'll drop black people in a second. So I'll make sure to do that from now on, because what I'm saying. I want you to understand that we're pro-black in here. So black people, yes, sir.
No, the only reason I mentioned that because it's top of mind currently, because yesterday, so I joined Clubhouse. You know that app?
I'm on Clubhouse too.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I joined Clubhouse fairly recently, maybe even a week ago, and I was in one of the rooms, and it was the room. This particular room was a crowdsourcing it was being powered by a crowdsourcing platform. I forget the name of it now, but it was started by 3 Black people, and they said this. They said this when they were introducing themselves to to everybody else in the room. and I spoke for a little bit about what I did, and then the next person that spoke after me said it was really nice that there was a minority founded, crowdsourcing platform, and I couldn't help myself. I said, just for clarification, was this founded by minorities or black people? And
Right.
everyone
Go
started
ahead. Talk to him, Neil. Talk to him, Neil.
everybody
Right.
everybody started laughing. But it's like, no, just I have no problem claiming what I am. I don't I've never been a minority a day of my life. I was black
Come
when I
on.
came out. I'll be black when I'm black now, and I'll be black when I die. So I got no problem calling my name, and so hopefully others don't have a problem calling theirs either. So
Right.
there's that. But when it comes to the actual course, essentially it is a 6-step process to practice and deliver any speech that you have to give. And when I originally came up with the course, I didn't come up with a process at all. It was actually somebody that pointed that out to me. And looking back on it as an engineer, I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't see that it should have been a process. Since even working in medical devices, I have to use a process to develop medical devices. It's FDA mandated. So essentially, it's four modules before, during, and after the presentation, and then there's an initial module on I guess more mental, mindset kind of things. And it's a fairly short course. I made it that way on purpose because I wanted to make sure people actually do them. One of the issues that a lot of online courses have is the completion rate. The people start them but then don't finish them, so you don't get the
Right.
what you could possibly get out of it if you don't finish it. And then another thing about my course is that I offer exercises at the end, because I mean, you can do all the listening to the actual course, but if you don't actually implement what I talk about during the course, it's of no use to you. You basically just wasted your money. But
Right.
one of the even just to go over one of the steps in the process is something that I certainly didn't take into account when I first started giving those presentations in front of management, and it was knowing your audience. I would get up
Yes.
there in front of people and just talk as if I was talking to a bunch of people that knew what I knew. And
Go
that was
ahead.
just not helpful because
Right.
they don't know what I know. That's why they're sitting there.
Right.
They want to know. They want to know what I know. But it's funny how I didn't really take that into account at the time. More so probably out of laziness. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time putting any kind of presentation together. I would just slap some slides
Right.
together, get up there, read the slides, and try to get out of there as quickly as possible. I knew that
Right.
I really needed to get better when I was getting questions that I thought I had answered during the presentation. But because I didn't present the material in a way that the people in the audience could take in and understand, I was getting these questions. And I guess the
Right.
final nail in the coffin is when my project got canceled. The project that I was actually brought to that company to do, once it was canceled, I thought, okay, I'm done for. They're probably going to fire me. Luckily, that didn't happen. They just assigned me to other projects. But that's what really kind of got me in gear in getting better at public speaking. So that's just one of the things. I guess the first step of the process is knowing your audience and tailoring your presentations to what they know or don't know.
You know what? Knowing your audience, it is even simpler than that. You talk about supply, demand, product, service, right? When you're selling something, you have a business, you're presenting something. Who are you talking to? Who are you selling to? What do they want? What do they need? What do they like? No matter, I could be the most eloquent person on the face of this planet. But if I'm talking to the wrong people or don't know who I want to talk to, none of that matters. The same type of concept where you could be the smartest person, but if nobody knows you, knows what you're about, you're not connected to anybody, you know what I'm saying? You're unsuccessful, which goes into the concept of interdependency and everything, right? Each one teach one, and us kind of moving in this world together, you scratching each other's backs for mutual growth and development. So you just said something so key. Know your audience. For all of us out here who have a business, all of us out here that have a course, all of us out here that are trying to give value in some way, shape, or form, hone your audience. Study your audience from age to other demographics. Black, white, green, yellow, dogs, cats, all that. You know what I'm saying? Who do you want to get what it is that you're giving? So thank you so much for that, man. I really appreciate it. Um, as we're getting to these last 15 minutes, and we start to think about STEM. One of the reasons why I love STEM is that it's so versatile, and we can see it implemented and how it should be implemented in everything from pure STEM fields, law, medicine, policy, practice. When you think about everything we've experienced when it comes to social justice in 2020, COVID in 2020, and other things, where do you see STEM being most needed in this next year and beyond? From emerging technologies to black people in our position in the world to society just moving itself forward.
I really like the when you talk about original man scientific and being able to look around and see and that brand being really prevalent in the city you're at and hopefully beyond that. When it comes to where I see it going, it really I think it starts with ownership, and that's really where the where no, thank you for that. I mean, it really starts. I honestly believe it really starts there. Working in patents. I mean, that's essentially what I work in. People owning what comes out of their head and being able to keep others from just ripping them off and taking whatever they took the time and effort to come up with and monetizing it to the detriment of the person that actually came up with the idea.
Yes, yes,
And
yes. Mm-hmm.
one of the biggest barriers, unfortunately, for a lot of people, I mean, specifically the black community or many of us in it, is this prohibitive cost that comes with getting patents. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, patents aren't cheap to get, and as I believe you even mentioned, just because you apply for one doesn't mean you actually get it. There's this
Right,
it can very well be a risky procedure, but you have to, I guess, balance the risk with the reward. Yes, it's kind of it's pretty expensive. Yes, you're not necessarily guaranteed you get the patent, but if all things go well, you actually own something and you can monetize it. And that's,
right,
I think, really helpful in building up any community, our community, the black community included. We get ourselves out of any rut that we're in by asserting ownership over things as opposed to
okay,
just going with the flow and just being. We need to more of us need to own, and I firmly believe that if we're able to get over those hurdles of the costs. I mean, as I mentioned, it could cost thousands of dollars, but what is your the liberation of your family, the liberation of your community? What's it worth? Is it
go ahead.
worth
Yep,
those thousands of dollars? I would hope so. I mean,
right,
what can you do to be able to come up with the money to apply for the patent? Perhaps it's moving down in lifestyle. I'm thinking about tangible things like looking at
right,
your expenses and seeing where you can cut things back. Perhaps not getting the newest car and settling for one that's used. Perhaps it's not buying the biggest house that you can afford, but buying a smaller home and pocketing the rest and using that for IP fees. Because when it comes down to it, I mean, it's also, I guess, a matter of delayed gratification. So sure,
right,
there's going to be a little pain and sacrifice at the beginning because perhaps you're not getting all the things that you want, but at the end, if you get a patent and you're able to monetize it, license it to other companies, so they pay you royalties. I mean, that's a win, and that's a win
right.
for our community. That's a win for everybody. So I'm a firm believer in ownership and that being the path forward for our community.
Absolutely. Man, you just said a mouthful. Family, 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 again, again, again. This is the STEM Files, the voice of STEM talent in Black culture, where we highlight the best and brightest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Your brilliant engineer, Tariq Kardak. We are live on Facebook at the STEM Files, YouTube at the STEM Files, and make sure to follow us as well on Instagram at the STEM Files as well. You just laid it out, man. You laid out the blueprint. You talked about ownership, and we talked about this in our last conversation too. And I think I said it then. When we as a people graduate from overly giving a dang what other people think about us who don't have our best interests at heart, don't even know us, and really don't care, then we'll move forward. Like you said, downgrading lifestyle. We want to be outward, showing other people who we don't know what we have versus actually moving to have those things, not for ourselves, but moving forward. And as we move into these last 10 minutes, everyone, please continue to like, comment, and share our content. Drop some questions. We still got 10 minutes left. We can do a lot of questions in that time frame. So please ask your question. We'll do our best to make sure you answer. But I want to talk about legacy. In your opinion, what is legacy, and what should it mean for Black people?
Legacy is what you're able to leave to the future generations, and
Mm-hmm.
what you should be leaving to them is ownership. It comes right back to ownership. I mean, if you can leave patents to to the future generations, so they continue to monetize them, license them to others, and bring in money for your family and their future generations. That's what other communities have done. It's they didn't get rich just because they got rich because they did well. Firstly, they did business amongst themselves, so they all benefited, like as it's called group economics. And then they also focused on owning things, owning assets. Assets develop value over time, and that equals money. It all comes, time equals money. I mean, it really has to do with I guess a mindset shift on what you value. I mean, we put time and effort into the things we value. We need to value ownership more.
And I asked that question. I'm so glad you went on that route, because I feel like a lot of our people today, we're a bit lopsided, and I think we talked about balance a little bit. There's this, I feel like, overindulgence in horizontal growth. We just need Black infrastructure. We just need the banks and the supermarkets and the land and this, that. We be all right. But I've been saying this a lot lately. But Black capitalism solely is not equal to Black liberation. What other people have been able to pass down, in addition to tangible assets such as land, businesses, etc., is morals and values, which is why their children don't sell off their stuff. You got a lot of times our people will inherit grandma's house and sell it because we don't want to maintain it. So somewhere down the line, the importance that is ownership in land and having something in your family is lost. Why? Because that connection, generation to generation, those morals and those values, those principles did not take firm root. Like as the scripture says, when it talks about stony ground versus fertile ground, when is it landing? When it lands on the brain, is it being coming in one ear and out the other, or is it sitting, germinating, and sprouting into a strong tree? So I think the horizontal growth and the aspects of the tangible, right, and the intangible, or the vertical growth, and being upright, having high character, high morals, is that which sustains anything physical that you're hoping to put forth in your legacy. So I think that we have to understand that to have anything go farther than a generation, lest we recreate America with a Black face.
There's certainly something to be said about future generations having the mindset of ownership that previous generations had. But there's something also to be said about selling in order to buy something that is of greater value than what you originally had. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with selling. It's the purpose of why you're selling. It's not just to get
Absolutely,
rid of
I agree.
just to get rid of grandma's house because you don't want the house anymore. Is it to go buy a bigger house that's even worth more than the house that grandma had? I mean, so
Right.
that's what I would want to say about that. But yeah, every generation having that mindset of ownership, they then will take on to their next generation, and it kind of was kind of like a domino effect. Every generation afterwards has this mentality, and they're willing to build off of what the previous generation did.
Absolutely, man. Like you're saying, you talk about generational wealth. We in a pandemic. I think now more than ever, people have understood that family and health is wealth. Because if you don't have those things, nothing of the material matters. And as we are in these last few minutes of the show, again talking about the new year, I want to return back to a couple of things we did in our older shows when we were back on Blog Talk Radio. So if I'm a young person, I walk up to you and I say, "Hey Neil, what is science, or what does science mean to you?" What would you say to that inquisitive mind?
And science is innovation. It's taking the knowledge that you have, or yeah, taking the knowledge that you have and using it to create something that didn't exist before. At least, well, that's kind of more engineering, but it's more about
Yeah,
just having the mindset of growing from where you were. Oh yeah, that's a better
I
definition, I
like
would
it.
say, of science.
Mm.
Well, thank you. Hopefully you wouldn't
That
say
was
you
good
didn't like
though. That was
it
good.
on
That was good.
camera.
It's so
Don't
funny
cut
because
me.
when you started it off, I was like, That's engineering."
That's
No,
engineering.
but then
Yeah.
I tell people I differentiate all the time, and I tell people I was like, "Yo, so like," and this goes back to that healthy marriage of the scientist to the engineer, and looking at it original man scientific. You have myself, I'm an engineer, Tariq's a scientist, and sometimes the scientists, I feel like they're both innovative, but Tariq has a personality where he doesn't think anything's impossible. And not that anything is, but I find myself just in my personality and me understanding the things as an engineer. All right, but what about this? What about this? Well, what if this happens? And he like, Jabril, but like, we just got to do it. We just got to do it. But I'm like, but look, from a process perspective, we have to look at everything and we have to carry the one, bring this down. And I'm so process oriented, meticulous. He's like, Jabril, we got to move. We got to do something. So that healthy marriage and helping each other from our respective disciplines and personalities help us move forward. So I love that you highlighted that.
Yeah, I mean, science basically
Um,
science. It starts with science, and then I suppose engineering is kind of an outgrowth of science. So you take the scientific principles and you use them to build, I guess, to engineer things. So yeah, maybe that's a better explanation. Hopefully, if someone did come up to me and ask me that question, I would perhaps I'd be a bit more artful in my answer to that question.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know, again, we're in the last 3 minutes. Again, I told you that this will go by so fast. Family, thank y'all so much for tuning in, for tapping in. Definitely want everybody to be safe this evening. You know, for those, as we go into this new year, I encourage everybody, enter in prayer. Thank God for those who believe in God or higher power, whatever you call them, for allowing you to get to this point. This has been a great and trying year for a lot of people. Some people, both notable, not so notable, if you will, haven't made it this far, will not be making it to 2021. And as we said, we're still in 2020, so anything can happen. But be thankful for family. Be thankful for health. Be thankful for those of us who still have money coming in. Be thankful that we had another day and several other days, 363 to be exact, or 64, to try to get it right. And another thing is have a clear definition of what it means to be successful to you. Too many of us use other people's definitions of success to try to pattern our own lives after, and it makes us unhappy. So, with that, family, I'm so thankful. This has again been the STEM Files, the voice of STEM talent in Black culture. Tariq Cardiac, your brilliant engineer, Neil Thompson. Anything you want to leave us with, Neil? Or where can we get in touch with people who are interested in your work, your book, your course, and anything else that you do?
Great. So when it comes to Teach the Geek, you can go to teachthegeek.com. When it comes to the children's book, you can go to askuncleneil.com. When it comes
Okay.
to the consulting, I suppose, for medical device or packaging, you can go to Steriliant. That's STERILIANT.com. And then I do the patent work I do is with Torrey Pines Law Group, and you can go to torreypineslaw.com.
Okay. So I saw a question. Omar, thanks again, bro, for tapping in with me earlier. Make sure to tap in with Neil to talk about platforms available for patents. I'm sure he can help you on with that, help you move forward in that regard. Yassine, I see you tapping in with me, bro. Always a pleasure, man, to tap in with you. Miss McClanahan, thank you so much. I see you in the comments on Facebook. Family, it's been wonderful. Until next time, this is the STEM Files. Happy New Year to everyone. Be safe. Enjoy time with your families. And let's hit the next 365 hard. All right. Until next time, this STEM Files.